So hi, everybody. I was delayed and just got here, so I understand it has been a long day, so I will try to keep it not too long. But I'm going to reintroduce myself a little bit. I have been with the Coca-Cola company for about 6 years now, 6 years in July, and I oversee content for Coke trademark, which is Coke Zero Sugar, Coke Orange Vanilla, Coke Life, and Coke Red. And then also for Diet Coke, for Minute Maid, and then for some of the content that comes from our Coca-Cola company handle. When I came to Coke, I actually started on the digital platforms team. Then I went to the IMC team that does content across all media vehicles for Coca-Cola trademark. And then 3 years ago, in 2016, Coke actually took a new approach to social media. So we started building, my boss at the time and one of my peers, the social center. And what we did, we took a look at the way all of the many brands at Coca-Cola were approaching social media, and it was very, very different. We had digital agencies running some of our brands. We had content agencies running some of our brands. We had in-house talent running some of our brands. So both for efficiency, but also just to learn, we decided to bring all social media in-house. So I am part of the Social Center, which basically is an in-house social media agency. So my team, we've grown, not my team, but the team has grown to about 80 people right now. And on my team, which oversees the brands I mentioned before, we own everything from the data and analytics to community management to content strategy and production, and then to account and project management. So all of that is done in-house at the headquarters in Atlanta. So while I've been at Coke for 6 years, my love for the brand started much, much earlier in my life. I grew up overseas. So I was born in South Africa. I spent time in Saudi Arabia, throughout Asia, so in the Philippines, in Thailand, in Singapore, and then in Greece. And through all those times, my life was very different in each place that I lived. Actually, Kodak, which was mentioned before, that's what took me to all of those places. My dad was the country manager for Kodak in those many regions. But one of the constants in my life, besides my family, obviously, was Coke. It was always there. So through the good times and the bad, and you can imagine as a middle schooler, as a high schooler, there was many dramatic times, but Coke was always there. To many people, this might sound a little bit silly, but it was always a comfort to me because wherever I went, I could find it. So it's one thing that I love so much about this brand. And it's not that it's only accessible to everyone, no matter how much money you make, but wherever you go, you are going to be able to find a Coca-Cola. So that is just something that I have always loved about the brand, the democratic nature of it, and it's just that a Coke really is for everyone. So while I grew up overseas, home has always been Atlanta. My mom was born, raised in Atlanta. Her dad built the church that my kids go to school at now. And so I spent 3 months of year each year in Atlanta. There are two things less well known in Georgia than the Atlanta Braves and Coca-Cola. So once again, another thing that I love about the brand is the best times in my life always often centered around Coca-Cola. I would come to Atlanta. I would so look forward to spending that time with my family, with my extended family, and Coke was always part of it. So just what this brand stands for, about bringing people together, about the optimistic times, it was just something else that I loved about this brand. So 6 years ago is when I had been in New York for 10 years. After I lived overseas, I went to university in South Carolina. Very, very big change, Greece to Greenville, South Carolina. But then anyway, I went to New York. And I spent 10 years in New York. I spent some time on the agency side. I was at Octagon Marketing for some time, and then also at Universal McCann. And then I spent my last 7 years at American Express. I met my husband in New York, and coincidentally, he actually worked for Turner. He's been there for about 16 years now. So 6 years ago, when Turner, which is also headquartered in Atlanta, moved him to Atlanta, I didn't object. I quit my job at Amex and we moved. My family was close by. They had moved back by then. So I was pumped. It was okay by me. That said, I came with one strategy. I moved to Atlanta and said I was going to work at Coke, and that's it. So it took me, thank goodness the strategy worked. It took me about 3 to 4 months, and I found a job at Coke. I got the job on the digital platforms team. So now I feel so fortunate that all the things I talked about, the reasons that I love the brand, the democratic nature of the brand, the optimism, the way that it brings people together, is what I get to do every day. I get to try to get those messages to consumers in social media. And it's one reason that I really, really love my job, is because I love what the company stands for. And it's been a part of my life since the beginning. So which brings me to why I'm here today. I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about the journey of social media at Coca-Cola. In the past 2 years, we've made some really, really big changes. And I'm going to talk you through the process of what we did and how we started over a little bit. We got super focused on what the brand stands for and making sure that all the messages we were putting out in the marketplace were consistent, that we're showcasing that had that red thread. So I'm going to start first with talking about social media, just the bigger picture of social media. And a lot of what I'm going to tell you are going to be things that you already know. It's things that, quite honestly, when our team, started looking at the data and started looking at the social media landscape, it was kind of like, duh. But then when we started applying them to what we are trying to do, and that was getting really smart about our content, we looked at the data totally differently. So I'm going to start with that, just big picture social media landscape. I'm going to get to then what we are currently doing at that time in social media, and also where we wanted to go. So this was in your deck too. Social media isn't new, and it has changed a lot. And I think one of the things that we started with is, are we changing with social media? Are we rethinking the way that we approach social media on a daily basis? So some of the data points, again, are going to not be surprising to anybody. And I would say 70% of internet using Americans check their feeds 1 time a day. No surprise. Here, and actually I am going to say 52 minutes is the average time that internet using Americans spend on social media a day. When this data point was first brought to me, I was like, not dramatic enough to use in this presentation. It just doesn't seem high. That said, I have 2 kids, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And when I started thinking about the amount of time I spend with them on a daily basis, 3 hours if I'm lucky. So 1/3 of that time is what people are spending on social media. That's huge. And then lastly, we just started looking at the groups of people. And again, not surprising that everyone uses it. I mean, 25 to 34 is definitely a sweet spot, but especially a brand like Coca-Cola that is for everyone, we need to resonate with all these groups of people. So I'm going to go back to where I started about when you think about the data points in a different way, they mean something totally different. For many years, I would say, I've been focused on social for 3 years at the Coca-Cola company, and we are constantly selling social to our brand partners, to our content partners, and trying to make them understand of the importance of social media. That's where you reach people. That's where people spend time. We looked at this totally different this time. And it wasn't about selling social to our colleagues. It was about us, our team, the social media team, realizing the importance of those numbers. People spend time there. Are we using those numbers in the right way? Are we getting the right content to people in the right way? Are they thinking about the brand in the way that we want them to think about the brand? Or almost more importantly, are we adding any value to their life? So we did that first. We looked at who's using, how long they're using, time spent, and then we just looked at how people are using it. And again, I actually think this point can get a little exhausting, but social media is becoming more and more negative. We all talk about it. It's about every conversation people have about social media. It's become a more negative place. I have presented this at least 100 times throughout the Coca-Cola company, and the one image that I always start on is thanks for the ad. So 10 years ago, when social media was just becoming more and more used, being introduced to the world, that wouldn't be something shocking to see if you added someone for someone to write back, to someone to respond, to post, thanks for the ad. There is no way that would happen now, right? I mean, people are adding us all the time, and it's just, accept, deny, but no one thinks another thing about it, right? But it is a small proof point of how much social media has changed. Because it used to be the little acts that would make people feel good that rarely happen now. And again, here are some percentages, but I think that we all know, and you probably all have friends or family, but how often people are either one, getting off of social platforms, or two, taking breaks, saying, I'm going to take a month off social media because it's making me, jealous. They unfollow people because it's filtering their lives. My brother, and I will give him a little credit here, but he plays pro soccer in Taiwan. And he most recently, he's taken a very different path in life than a lot of his friends. And he recently got off a platform in social media, and it makes it so much more difficult for us to keep up with him. I used to keep up with his team, with his games, with little things that he is doing over there, and it's a 24-hour time difference. And I no longer can do that. He was so sick of people judging the path that he had taken in life, which I actually think is pretty cool. And then finally, and I don't have a personal antidote to this. When I was a teen, social media was not around, but I think we hear it all the time. It is constantly in the news. But the fact that 20% of teens have been bullied, and it's just so easy. In my intro, I have a 2-year-old and almost 5-year-old. It gives me anxiety already. It'll be so easy for people to bully them, and it's become such a common place for people to go and see the negative and point out the negative. This is not as serious as what, people being bullied and the things that happen, but even I have our head strategist and analyst over here for our team, but, so often people come to us when they're asking about the sentiment of a post or, how people are talking about us and why is it so negative? It's so negative because it's easy. Because people hide behind a screen and they use this to say mean things to people, to put you down, and it is so easy. But I'm going to flip the switch. All this being said, social media is a really positive place. And I hear about my friends getting off of social media, and I wouldn't, because it has done so many good things too. And it's where we as Coca-Cola wanted to focus. How can we help push the good and stay away from the bad? And that's where we focused. So I think about connection. And I started with, I lived overseas my entire life. And the number of people that I keep up with that were in Saudi Arabia with me, in the Philippines with me, especially in Singapore with me, is amazing. And it is because of social media. The crisis and keeping people safe, that's something, thank God, I've never had experience with, but it's a good thing. Fundraising. There are so many things that I even donate money for that I would never know about if it weren't for social media. And then finally, just the one thing that we saw and we often talk to people about is people go out of their way on social to find good. They go out of their way to find inspiration. They go out of their way to find things to make them smile. It's a moment of time, but it's there. I also the like-minded people that you can connect with. It's become more and more real for me in the last year or two, but I will use as my example, the Peloton Moms group. So it is a group that I started following. A colleague of mine just, pointed me in their direction. And, it's tips and tricks of people that are like-minded doing the same types of things that I'm doing. But it's also people I would never connect with. And I promise you there are products, at least 5, 6 a month I buy because these people are like me. And if it weren't for social media, I would never know. So there are so many good things about what social media can do if more people were focused there. So this is where we focused as Coca-Cola. People spend a lot of time there, but where do brands fit in? And there are a lot of brands that have gotten a lot of attention for being snarky because it entertains people. And so we as Coca-Cola focused here. How do we differentiate ourselves, but also find ways to add value to consumers while staying true to who we are? And I think that's one of the things that we all struggle with, is just differentiating ourselves, being true to our brand, but then also offering value and utility to consumers. So we did that first. We took a look at just the social media landscape, and we just, looked who was using, how was using, and just some of the themes that we were seeing. And then we took a really deep look at ourselves. And we have a lot of followers. And I think that's one thing that we tell people internally all the time, is people follow us. This is an opportunity. Paid or not paid, there are some, some of the platforms, 10% of an organic audience will see you without paid media. So this is an opportunity, and one that we shouldn't dismiss. But what are we doing? And I'll get more into that. What are we doing, and what do we want people to think when they see our content? And that was just where we became very, very focused. So we did that. We also took a deep dive into who was following us, knowing that our numbers are big. Organically, people are going to see it, to see our content. And we realized, I can't get too specific, but we had to be more inclusive, right? Again, we had to change with social media, and we had to get our future drinkers while keeping our existing drinkers. And so really in the audience, we realized, what can we do to be more inclusive? How were we going to do that? How are we going to create meaningful content? And I've touched on this a couple of times already, that again is meaningful to consumers, but also is true to our brand. Because we can't walk away from our brand and being authentic to it, but how can we use that and create meaningful and valuable content for our consumers? So what did we do? We got honest with ourselves. And this is a slide again that I have showed internally many, many times. This is an example of the content that we put out in Q1 of 2018. I can say the work is bad because I was still leading a lot of this work, but it wasn't bad. There was just no red thread. And one of the challenges that we had as a brand is that Coca-Cola is for everyone. Coca-Cola makes sense with sports. Coca-Cola makes sense with food. Coca-Cola makes sense with music. And so there was pockets of really good work, but when you looked at the body of work, there was no red thread. So we had, and again, I'll get a little detailed, but in Q1, we talked about Coke Zero Sugar. It's when we had just changed the product itself. We then went into sports in January. Who can tell me what sports are big in February? Not many, not MLB. The MLB preseason hadn't even started. And then we went into March Madness, and that's something that we did again this year, and I'll get to how we approached it differently this year. But what we did then was take what we had on TV and tried to retrofit it into a basketball message. And to connect deeply with fans, it just wasn't the right approach. Luckily, though, Coca-Cola is an iconic and well-defined brand that for the past 127 years, this May 8th, has always stood for the same thing. It has always been about bringing people together. It has always been about being for everyone. It has always been about having an optimistic view on life. So when we were recreating our social strategy, we didn't need to create the brand strategy because it has existed for many, many years. And we know when we have a clear point of view, and if you see some of the Super Bowl work that we've done in the past, which the last one is a Coke is for everyone, people react well. People engage. People like it when we have a point of view. So we focused on 3 key things that I've touched for the most part on. So 1 is how can we resonate with a more inclusive audience? 2, how can we have unique content that is both a value and a utility to consumers? And 3, if we were going to do this, we were going to do it the right way. We were going to draw a line in the sand to show our internal partners. And, you know, quite frankly, it probably was going to be more obvious to our internal partners, but we were going to make it clear to them, we are starting fresh and we're going to make the change big. So before we did that, and I'm going to get to that, we started testing. So what I'm going to show you now is what we did in the summer of last year. And it's when we started to first approach content in a really, really different way. And we wanted to, in talking to our brand partners and talking to our content partners, we wanted to show how storytelling could work more, how not just putting out a brand message is what people want to see, but if we could really connect with consumers, we can show how Coke is a meaningful part of their lives. They're a part of the big moments. So what we did is we partnered with a group of students from Plainfield, Illinois. And it was, for the most part, a group. It was their last summer before college. And we got to know them. I was there for part of the time doing a little matchmaking. But where our team just followed this group of students around for about 2 to 3 weeks. We made Coke available to them, but it was more about just Coke being a natural part of what they were already doing. So I'm going to show you a clip from what we did there, but I would say it was the first step that we took into storytelling in a very different way in social media, and just really, and not so pushing it in someone's faces, but letting our brand values come through Coke just being a part of their lives. I think this works if I press again.
This is one of the most important years. This is the last summer that we'll all be together. You're not very loud now.
I want it to be like an ugly breakup. I want to spend every single second with the people that I love.
So we call this a social campaign. It didn't ladder back up to one of our meals campaigns or our sports campaigns, but it was when we just approached content really differently. We teased, this was a teaser that you saw, this series across all channels. We made, I think, 4 8 to 10 minute long episodes, and we learned a lot. I mean, first we learned that people will engage with your content for the right amount of time if it's interesting. We were even pushed by the brand team, don't force the product. And we didn't force the product. It was there, Smart Water was there, Dasani was there. You know, they could make their own choices. But it was for us, just seeing young consumers have Coke in very relevant times in their lives and telling deeper stories. So we have more things coming up this year, actually, where we're using these learnings. But what I'm going to talk about now is just how we use just changing our overall strategy moving forward. So last year, November 13th was World Kindness Day. It was also during the election primary, so when we anticipated would be an especially negative time in the digital space. And this is when we decided to launch our new strategy to try to become the most optimistic brand in social. It was called Refresh the Feed. We, in the days leading up to World Kindness Day, we deleted all of our content. It's a little more dramatic than what we did, but we archived all of our content on Instagram. So if you go to our Instagram feed now, this content you see here, you can't see because it was all archived. On other channels where we couldn't do that without losing data, we created a lot of space between what was before and what was to become to, again, hold ourselves accountable, but to show people internally and externally that if we were going to do this, if we really were going to focus on our brand values, we were going to do it in a big way and we were not going to go backwards. So on World Kindness Day, our team relaunched with 99 new pieces of creative on Instagram. So the team spent a lot of time, and we basically just repopulated our feed, and that's what you'll see now among new content if you go to our Instagram feed. We did the same on Facebook, on Snap, on Twitter, where we just started publishing all this new content. If you look at it, you'll see a couple of things. One, it is in our brand colors. Right now, it's all graphic. What you won't see is product and everything. But what you will see in every single piece of that content, it was about our brand values, about coming together, about being optimistic. And so that was the red thread. For this, we went beyond social, which was awesome for our team. Coca-Cola has a digital billboard in Times Square in New York City, so we overtook that for a couple of days. We also worked with artist partners. So we had a couple of artist partners, but again, it was very, very important to us that the artist partners that we worked with, that this message was authentic to them. So the brief was loose. There was, colors they had to use, but the brief was stay true to who you are and create optimistic messaging that will go to your followers and they won't be surprised and will also fit with what we're doing. And it worked. In that 24, 48-hour period, we saw 69 million impressions, which is good for a single day because, again, this was not something that we pushed a ton of money at. But I think the biggest success metric for us was the sentiment. And we saw that by doing this, we doubled our positive sentiment in a day. And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to see that if we tried to just be an optimistic voice, that it would resonate. And as expected, it's what people wanted to see. They engaged. So we got 1.4 million engagements, but again, it was about the positive engagements, and that's what we wanted to see. So that's what we did on November 13th. For us, for our social team, it was a huge accomplishment for us. We're really proud of the work. We're really proud of the results that we see, and honestly continue to see. So a lot of our sentiment is increasing. The people who are talking about us are changing. And that's exciting. It's exciting for us, and we are holding ourselves accountable. So immediately following, we had a holiday campaign. And holiday is easy. I mean, we always see social sentiment higher during the holiday season. So it was good. It was easy in this way to continue this strategy. We did a series called 25 Days of Giving, where it was just encouraging consumers to do small acts of kindness. Again, having that balance of sometimes it was calling your grandmother. Other times it was buying someone a Coke. So it was a nice balance between, product related and not product related, but always with the red thread of offering optimism and togetherness in the digital space. Another example is this year, International Women's Day. We partnered with 3 global artists who were, I'm almost done. We partnered with 3 global artists. And again, the brief to them is, what would you tell your old self? What optimistic messages would you tell your old self? And this is what we got from them. And again, it was different because we're trying to think of different ways to bring this strategy to life, but still on strategy of being optimistic. And we're still pushing ourselves. So, I mean, the last example that is a more recent example I'll tell you a little bit about is March Madness. So we, Coca-Cola, launched a new product during March Madness, which was Coke Orange Vanilla. And it was, again, a nice balance. So we pushed out very product-forward messaging, still in the same voice that our strategy spelled out. But then also, if you go to our Instagram feed, you'll see some human stories, right? So we're trying to move away from just saying, we're here, you're not, and then telling these human stories that Coke does bring people together during sports games. So telling about fans and things that they're passionate about. And again, adding some value, entertainment, but then also in moments that make sense for Coca-Cola. I think that's it.
Really good stuff. Thank you. We have time for questions. So any questions for Katie? Yeah, up here. Thank you.
So you work on content for some of the best known brands in the world. How do you think, if at all, about influencers as a source of content creation for your brands, or is it just, particularly with what you're doing here, how does that fit in, or does it not?
You know, we've had a journey with influencers. I think influencers is a tricky space. And our team right now doesn't completely own influencers, but they can be so much value to a brand and just, you know, expanding your reach. I would say the biggest thing when we choose to work with influencers is working with people that authentically love the brand. I would say that we are trying to move more away from paying the big bucks for people with a lot of followers, #ad, but actually finding people who love the brand and helping tell their stories. We have some content coming up that, you know, more micro influencers, but people that live and breathe our brand values and love the brand. And I think right now, that's the direction that we're going. There have been, we've used them in many different ways. I think that some of the influencers that have the large followings can be incredibly useful, especially when you're trying to build a following. So Snap, for example, I mean, that was one place where I think big influencers could help us by bringing them to our channel. But I think now when we look at using influencers, it's really about, do they love the brand and do they live and breathe the story that we want to tell? And that is always the filter we'll put them through, versus how can I partner with somebody with 4 million followers to, you know, #ad and get paid for what they're putting out there. But I also think different influencers are good for different things, and sometimes that is the right thing to do.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
2 questions. The first one is, how do you, in a company the size of Coca-Cola, how do you bring your strategy to the broader marketing strategy and get enough buy-in across all the different people that touch marketing? That's one. And the second one is, how is Coca-Cola looking at user-generated content from the consumer?
So I'll start with the first, which is how do we get our social strategy sold in? And the short answer is we shouldn't have to, because our strategy should always ladder up to the brand strategy, right? So I think more it's the executions that we're trying to get sold in. And it's a conversation we had with the man who leads Coke Trademark last week is, listen, what Coke stands for has not changed, and we're not trying to change it. We're just trying to execute it in the right social way. So I think more what we're trying to get sold in is the tactics and the execution, and helping them understand that those are very social first ways to bring our brand strategy to life in social. And second question, user-generated content. So, you know, one thing that I didn't put in this presentation was our community management. And I would say we have put such a focus on our community management in the past 18 months, and our community management team is killing it. And just more in a way of the way that they're responding to people, and it's more people, but it's also in deeper ways. And then also, so user-generated content is very important to us. We are not so much using it on our channels because it's so hard to curate, but I would say it's important to us more in a responding way. And I think we're still trying to figure out how we can take that content and feature it more on our channels. But the one-to-one with our fans is increasingly becoming more and more important. And so many ideas that we have, when the team will come to me with a creative idea, it's so often is there a community way to execute this? Is there a way, you know, one-to-one that's beyond about getting their content, but just connecting with them in the right way and showing appreciation for the UGC?
Any other questions? All right, Ellie.
How are you utilizing storytelling on social to actually generate ROI for Coca-Cola?
I mean, and this is listen, and I'm not going to pretend to be the ROI expert, but I think what we do know is that social is a huge ROI driver. We know that. So I think that we're waiting to see. right? I mean, I think that we're waiting to see if this new approach is going to continue the ROI. But I mean, across the board right now, we haven't seen any changes. It's still a strong driver. So I think that storytelling, honestly, engagement is sometimes the metrics to use with that.
Well, I just want to add real quick. Sorry, this is probably it. I'm sorry. I just want to add real quick that I think this was a really awesome way to end the first day, just to hear, and thank you, by the way, for telling kind of your personal story in the beginning and how that tied to working for a brand that you've, for most of your life, been passionate about. I think, in all the strategy that we've been hearing all day today and tomorrow, it is obviously, you talk about ROI and what's going to be the most valuable, but whenever you have an opportunity in the social media space to work for a brand that you truly are passionate about, you're going to obviously see more success from that. So kudos to you for landing that opportunity several years ago. And once again, let's hear it for Katie. Thank you so much.